Hello to everyone. Welcome to the session on virtual field experiences in business and management. My name is David Langley. I'm a staff member in the Center for Educational Innovation. On this opening slide, we have a couple of comments to you just to remind you of kind of how to interact with us over the course of the next hour. If you have questions, you'll be able to ask them either verbally. I have muted you right now. Of course, you can unmute whenever you want, and you want to talk with the group or with me individually. So you can unmute whenever you want to. You can also type into the chat panel. Also, a reminder that the session is being recorded, and that recording should be available perhaps in the first week of May, perhaps maybe the beginning of the second week at the latest. So that should be prepared as well. We'll also have a set of notes from this that I will be summarizing, so I may be able to give you some of those summarized notes too as well. I want to introduce the session team. It's a nice, large team, very skilled set of individuals. My note taker is Mary from the CEI, and I have James as a chat monitor. James will be interrupting us from time to time when I ask him to give me some questions or issues that might be being raised on the chat. Thank you, Carolyn, for registering for this and being our subject matter librarian. We have Tony from the Carlson School of Management. And then I want to spend a few minutes with both Siddharth and Ellen, who are our faculty experts from the Carlson School of Management. Hoping both of them are in at this time. Hi, Siddharth, good to see you. And in fact, why don't we actually get started with a short introduction by Siddharth and by Ellen. Siddharth, we'll start with you. Just tell us a little bit about your background at Carlson, the kind of work you've been doing, and certainly you're here because you have a nice background in virtual field experiences. So let's take a minute or two and have you do that.
Yeah, thank you, David. Appreciate the opportunity. Hello, everyone. My name is Siddharth Chandramouli, and I am the Managing Director of the Carlson Consulting Enterprise, which is part of the Carlson School of Management. As some of you may know, the Carlson Consulting Enterprise is an experiential learning program within the Carlson School of Management. It is all full-time MBA students in the Carlson School need to be part of one of 4 enterprises. So there's the consulting enterprise that I lead, there's brands, there's one called funds that's focused on corporate finance, and then there's one called ventures focused on startups and entrepreneurship. So my enterprise is primarily geared towards those students who are interested in careers in consulting. So think of those that want to work for companies like Accenture, Boston Consulting Group, McKinsey, and so on, or they want to apply the problem-solving skills that they learn in a consulting setting to more internal roles, say with a Cargill or a 3M or Ecolab, and so on. So in addition to these MBA students, we also have a fair number of undergraduate students that come through our program every year. So I have a cohort of about 40 to 50 students per year. And they work in team-based environments in projects over the course of 2 semesters. So each semester we have about 10 to 11 projects going on with leading clients in industry or public sector or government. So for example, we have projects going on with United Health Group, Cargill, Donaldson, many of the leading companies in town, as well as entities such as the McKnight Foundation, and the Met Council and Met Transit, as well as Hennepin County. So that's kind of an example of projects that we do. We work on projects related to strategy, operations, organizational design. And I have my team, so I lead the center, but also I have a team of a couple of associate directors who come from a similar background as me, and we all work together to mentor and coach the teams to make sure that they learn, but also deliver their projects successfully to their clients.
Yeah, great. What a background. That's fantastic.
Thank you. Sorry if I spoke too long, but if you want, I can share a little bit more about myself, but I'm happy to kind of turn the floor over to Ellen.
Sure, it'll happen. Ellen, if you're here, Ellen, could you reintroduce yourself as well? hoping Ellen Trader, are you on? Okay, well, we will
Hi,
catch
I'm Ellen. No, I'm Ellen.
Oh, there she is.
I'm
Hi.
sorry. I had muted myself.
Okay.
So sorry about that. I am Ellen Trader. I have a similar role to Siddharth, so I won't duplicate some of the great things that he said, but thank you so much for having me here today. This is great. I have been at the Carlson School of Management for 6 years in a role that's similar to Siddharth's role in that I run what is similar to an enterprise, but is in the MSBA program, which is our Master of Science in Business Analytics program. But similar to Siddharth, we run projects for companies. We have about 120 students in the program right now. And so we're running 23 projects right now with a wide variety of companies, similar companies to the types of companies Siddharth mentioned. We are a couple of differences between the way our enterprises run. We have a lot of faculty involvement as well. And so we have, in addition to myself and my team, we have a faculty advisor signed on to every single project. So we're managing that relationship as well as the client relationship. We also, I'd say another difference is that we have about 80% international students. And so we're dealing with some communication challenges often. And so that kind of makes that remote experience that more challenging sometimes. And so, but yes, we've been successful in running these remote projects and we're doing it right now. So love to share or answer any questions that people might have about getting this done.
Very good. I'll be relying on both of you throughout this whole session. So thanks very much. By the way, my slides have changed a little bit from what I sent to you, so you'll catch that as well.
Okay.
I want to give you a brief overview about where we're going to try to go. One will be some comments and questions that we'll have about how to prepare for a virtual field experience. In fact, for many of you who have done field experiences, the question will be about how you prepare for any field experience and how you might prepare a little differently for this one. It's important to have a sense of how to sustain that experience. That is, what do we do when things are going well, and perhaps what do we do when it's not going so well? How do we keep that experience vibrant and alive? There's an assurance of learning period here, a little more than halfway through our session, where we'll talk about how we should be assessing student learning, but also how faculty should be assessing themselves as leaders of and facilitators of these experiences, and perhaps also how the client should be assessing the experience too. And then a little bit about satisfaction with the experience. Here, Siddharth and Ellen will talk a little bit about some of the things that students have been telling you and that your clients have been telling you about this experience. So let's take a jump into this first one. I'm going to share the screen for just a minute or so, and then I will get off and pull it off to the side so I can see some more people on the screen. So here's the range of things that we'll want to talk about it, and I will verbalize them sort of one at a time. One is about the issues that you have right now for those of you who are trying to do this summer in locating clients during this environment. Second one is about what students should be able to achieve in any field experience and how those things might change for a virtual field experience. And then the kind of challenges we have when we try to transform a face-to-face to a virtual environment and solutions to those challenges. So I'm going to pull that off, and hopefully we have lots of folks on screen, and we'll go back to that first question, which is, what are the issues in locating clients or locating sites in this current environment? What kind of issues do we have to wrestle with in trying to locate those clients? So Ellen, let me just start with you and see if that has been an issue, if you anticipate it being an issue.
So we were in some ways fortunate in that this pandemic occurred in the middle of our semester when we had already secured our clients. One thing that was a great outcome, though, is that no clients dropped out. So everything that we had in place stayed in place. We were able to maintain all the relationships and continue all the work that we had been planning and move it forward. As I'm looking for projects for this summer, it is harder. It is much more challenging to find projects, not because of, I think for really the main reason that I hear from clients is just they don't have the bandwidth to even think about it right now. And so it's really challenging because in thinking about the projects that we want to do with companies, we do spend a fair amount of time talking about scope and what they're trying to solve for. And it doesn't just it's not just a 30-minute conversation. And so to do it right, we need to really have these conversations, and we're just finding it's tough to get, tough for people to find the time. So I do think it's just going to take more time for us to find the projects that we need. I don't think it will be impossible, but I think we just have to prepare that it's just going to take some more time to get the projects lined up than it typically would.
Siddharth, let me ask you a question that's related to this. Can you give me a sense of the range of clients that one would have currently for this summer or in past summers? What's kind of been the range of projects that students have been involved in as you've been locating them?
When you talk about range, are you talking about the types of clients, the size of clients, or the nature of the projects themselves?
Yeah, nature of the projects.
The nature of the project. So in my enterprise, we primarily do a lot of what you would call strategy work. So we have clients who might want us to do maybe about 70% of our projects kind of fall in that category, where clients want us to go and look at a new market. They may be at a saturation point in their current business, and they'd like us to go and explore the landscape and say, what are some new opportunities for our business? They may have something very specific. For example, they may say, look, we are trying to launch a new product in this space. Can you try and help us figure out some, who are the competitors there, and what is the competitive landscape that we should be familiar with? There may also be some operations type projects. So for example, there may be a company that says, hey, we are trying to optimize our distribution centers operations or our supply chain. Can your team help us with that? And finally, there's also some projects that fall into maybe 30% of our projects around organizations. So help us redesign our organization so that we can be more agile and responsive to our customers. Or can you help us figure out some best practices, for, say, from other peer institutions that we can gather, and that'll inform our as we adapt our own organization. So those are the types of projects that we work on.
Hey, I've got a great question that just came up. James, I'm going to jump into this one. It just came up on the chat. Rajiv, thanks for adding the question. Yeah, Avi, if you can read that, I'd love to hear about the support structure that both of you have in your enterprise. Are you or administrative staff managing these experiences? What's the support structure available to maintain the relationship between the businesses and the school? Question makes sense?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I can start. One thing that you should know for both Siddharth and my projects, we do charge a fee to the companies for the work. And so we do have quite a bit of budget that we're working with. So we're self-sustaining. We don't, we have no budget from the school, but we are able to then have teams, so I have 2 associates. And then, like I mentioned, I have faculty that are also paid to help with the project. So this all comes from the fees from the projects. And so, yeah, there would be no way we could do this level of work without it. I couldn't do it by myself. There'd be no way it would be at this level. And so this does help us provide really good experiences for the clients, but then also, like you mentioned in your question, maintain the relationship over time. These are relationships that we're cultivating all year long. And that's possible because I have a team of 2 associates that focus on business development.
Got it. For the other folks here who are from both UMD and Crookston, and anyone else here from Carlson, that first question was about locating clients. For those of you who are, in fact, going to be trying to teach one of these virtual experiences this summer, can you describe any other issues you've got beyond what Siddharth and Ellen have described in trying to locate clients? Is that an issue or not? So I'll leave it open to the floor. Make sure you unmute. You're going to respond to that.
Hi, this is Rachel from Crookston, and I've worked quite a bit with identifying clients and client-based projects. And one of the things that we've had to always deal with is the proximity from our clients. So we've had to have them online, and we've had to connect with them virtually. So some of the things that we've done is, we have places on our website, or we had a website where people could sign up to kind of have a consultation if they were interested. We've done press releases, and really just connecting with our communities. But a lot of our work has had to be done online or via phone with minimal contact to the client, because some of our clients are 3 hours away.
Thanks, Rachel. Good to see you. Other folks, issues in locating clients or finding sites in this current environment, particularly if you're involved this summer?
David, we do have one question in the chat. Do clients pay for services?
This is Ellen and Siddharth.
Yeah, I think to echo Ellen's point, in our enterprises, in our programs, yes, clients do pay for services, and we're expected to be self-sufficient. Although that there are other programs within the Carlson School, I believe. So, for example, we have a lot of inaction classes, as you may have heard the term, where as part of a class, there may be a project at the end that involves a real client project. So I don't know, Ellen, that they necessarily pay in those situations.
Right. I definitely think there are situations where the work is unpaid, but I then think that the level of service is a little different than what Siddharth and I provide, which we really do try to provide a professional level of service. So there's a little bit different expectation in a paid versus non-paid situation. I think if summer and fall turns out to be really challenging from the perspective of finding projects, we may have to, relook at the way we charge fees, the level of fees. I mean, that's something where in the past we haven't had to sharpen our pencils. But we do need to find these projects. They are part of a class. And so ultimately, we're not sure where we'll have to go with that, but it's a possibility that we'll have to think a little bit differently about our fees.
Okay, let me jump down to the second question under preparing for the virtual experience. And this is really for everybody initially, and then certainly we'll come back to Ellen and Siddharth as well. So the first question was, what should students achieve in any field experience? And that second question would be, how do the goals differ for a virtual field experience? So for those of you who've been supervising field experiences or expect to be doing that this summer and onward, what are some of the things we say students are supposed to achieve in any of our field experiences? What kind of phrasings could you give me? Just remember to unmute. What do we want students to achieve in a field experience?
I'll jump in here to fill the silence, I guess. This is Rajiv here. I'm on the faculty in the marketing department at UMD. And I think the greatest value of the field experiences is for students to see how the different elements of the concept we talk about in class fit together. So one of the things I tell students, there's two sources of value in doing field projects. One is that textbooks and lectures and classes tend to be nice and clean and structured. We have a table of contents. We go through topics one by one. We talk about these different principles influencing consumers, etc. But the real world is very messy. So dealing with messiness is a great source of value for the students. And the second thing is dealing with complexity. And what I mean by that is that in our classes, especially my classes, consumer behavior, I talk about all these principles of influence and factors influencing the decision process. But it seems when we talk about it one topic at a time. But in the real world, there are all of these influences acting on consumers. So you can't predict that, well, because of this theory, here is how consumers will react. There's a lot more going on. So complexity and messiness / uncertainty are the two greatest sources of value.
Got it. Thank you. Much appreciated. James,
maybe I could add to that too.
Go ahead, Siddharth.
So I would echo what Rajiv said. One of the things that we try to do in the enterprises, and I think is that we, as Rajiv said, the complexity, I like to call it ambiguity. So the ambiguous problem solving, taking something that a client tells us, hey, we need to go into a new market. We don't know what those opportunities are. I think that feels very uncomfortable for students. And we tell them that, look, this is the level of specificity that we can provide for you at this time. Part of the learning experience is for you to actually sift through all that and come up with something that feels less ambiguous to the client and something that's more concrete, because it's not as if we are holding information back from you at the start of the project. This is what we know and this is what the client knows. And part of the learning is actually doing that discovery. I think that is a big piece of learning that the students often struggle with, but I think by the end of the semester, they see value in that, having gone through that process.
And Ellen, I'd like to shift to you quickly for periods where you would have done this in a face-to-face environment, one way or the other. Have those kind of goals that have just been described, do they change at all for a virtual field experience? Do you try to maintain that as much as you can, or do you shift a little bit for the goals?
We haven't shifted our goals at all. Actually, there was one thing that I would add, and this may be the nature of the type of work we do, which is translation. So we're really looking for our students to be able to translate really their technical work, which they are used to describing in a very technical language, to the language of business. And so that can be a little more difficult to do with no face-to-face interaction. So doing that entirely through Zoom has been more challenging, because there are, sometimes there are things that are just lost in the translation of being on an online environment versus having that opportunity to be face-to-face. And so what we're doing to address that is having the students spend a little more time with the clients. So they've had more meetings than they would have typically, so that they can make sure that the communication of the concept is coming across. But in general, no, otherwise, the ambiguity still remains. The problem solving is still really critical. The complexity, all the other things that were mentioned, I think are consistent and need to be accomplished.
I see a hand raised from Kanhaiya Sinha. Go ahead.
So I'm Kanhaiya from the Lebovic School of Business in Duluth. And I've just started my career in University of Minnesota last fall. So I had a bit of an experience doing some fieldwork with some of our projects. Now, over and above what Rajiv and Siddharth have mentioned about the complexity of a real world problem as compared to a case study or a project which they create in the class, there's one more dimension which I think is very much in play when you deal with real businesses, is sort of a leadership and power issue. So students have an idea and they want to go in a given direction. So this one project that this team just finished, they would always come to me. The owners want to go in a given direction, and we have three parties involved here. So we have the business school, we have the engineering school where they're doing the technical part of the project, and then we have the owners, and everyone tries to pull the project in a given direction as much as they understand it. And so I had to take a stand that forget the owners. You are looking at the business and see it as a business and give advice which from your knowledge perspective is the best way to go. And that is all. They don't drive your decision making. They don't drive your application of different concepts that you learned in the class. And once you present it to them, it is their choice to accept your recommendation or not. But while you are doing the project, you have to lead, you have to take the ownership, and you have to show the confidence that you are in charge as far as this aspect of the business is concerned while you are doing the project. Now, this is something because students are very humble and they like, sometimes they don't want to assert, they have a problem. And this is something which is very important for them to learn, that when you are in a real business situation, it is not like a classroom. There are different forces that act on a given recommendation or a given process. And you being the weakest part of the system, like students, so the only way you can assert yourself is your knowledge power. And how effectively, whether it is validated through your surveys and research, whether it is validated through the concepts that you use. So they did a great job in the sense that now they are going to present to the owners of the company a totally different way of marketing their product.
Yeah.
So this need to be able to maneuver the different power forces that act in real life business situation, that is an additional thing over and above what we have already discussed.
Thank you so much. I do much appreciate your insight and comments on that. I want to try to finish off this last slide here and open it to the whole group and then try to provide some of those solutions from Ellen and Siddharth. The question is about, for those of you who will be doing something this summer or perhaps next fall, remember, we may be in this environment to some degree next fall. And the question was about the top anticipated challenges that you see when transforming your face-to-face field experience to a virtual experience. So this is open to other folks, and then I'm gonna offer up what some of those solutions might be by heading to Ellen and Siddharth. So here's the question again: what are your top anticipated challenges when you've been trying to transform your current face-to-face course to a virtual course? What do you think is gonna really occupy your time and really take up a lot of time? And then we'll look at some solutions. So open to everyone, top anticipated challenges in making that transformation.
Hi, David. This is Praveen Aggarwal
Hi,
from
Praveen.
Duluth campus. So one of the questions that I had, one thing that we are anticipating is that how do students work on projects that involve the use of or access to confidential data? So when you are in a face-to-face environment, you are at the client's facilities, and they are responsible for all the data security issues. So Alan, given that you are working with MSBA students, you must have seen this issue come up. So how do you anticipate dealing with this challenge?
Ellen, go ahead.
Yeah. So this has always been a piece of what we do. We don't, even when we haven't been working remotely, the students work at Carlson. They're not working on site at the client. So we've had to negotiate with all our clients to get access to data. And we have a couple different models for how we do that, but the data is often stored on a secure server at the U, or the students get VPN access to the client data warehouse as another option. We have just a handful of times where the students do go work on site, but out of 23 projects we have right now, we had set 3 up to do that. The rest, we were handling the data on our, storing it on our servers or had VPN access to the client's data warehouse. And so we sign NDAs and, the data is de-identified, and there's all sorts of, it does take some time, obviously, and there are hurdles involved, but yeah, this has been something that it is possible because for the 6 years I've been in this role, this has been something that we've had to negotiate for every project.
So Alan, I have a question here related to this NDA. Like in my past experience dealing with MBA students who work on projects, typically we have a school NDA, which is a standard format for clients who don't have their own NDA, or sometimes the clients insist on their own NDA.
Right, yeah.
Now, sometimes some students are hesitant to sign those NDAs. Like a statement would say, you will never work, or next 5 years, you'll not work for a competitor company. Now, most of these students who will be in the job market in the next 6 months or 9 months, they are very hesitant to sign an NDA of that type.
Mhm.
And so we have only two options. Either we negotiate with the client and take out those clauses, or the student is moved to a different project. So how do you, in
Mhm.
your case, handle a situation like this?
So we've always been able to negotiate with the client to have them remove that type of language. Thankfully and fortunately, I think the work we do for the clients provides a lot of value, and they're really interested in working with us, and so there is some motivation. But we've been able to make sure that that kind of language isn't part of the NDAs our students would sign. Generally, though, I should back up a second. The students don't generally sign these NDAs. It does happen in a handful of times, but these are typically an NDA that's signed by the school. So it's not a student signed NDA. So these are our NDAs go through our office of general counsel. They're not signed at the student level generally. Very infrequently they are. And in those cases, we have that language removed.
Okay.
Let's try one more challenge. We'll spend a fair amount of time on preparing, but just like you would in any other course, preparing takes a lot of time. It is most of the time we take as teachers. So let's try one more anticipated challenge that someone believes may in fact be there as you switch from face-to-face to a virtual. One more from the crowd, and then we'll head to our Carlson experts. Okay, if there aren't any, let us move. I'm going to share my screen for the second part of this, which is about sustaining the virtual field experience. So let's take a look at the items we have up here. So the experience has begun. You are a number of days or weeks into that experience. And you can look at this from a couple of different standpoints. The first question is, what can faculty do to check on how well the experience is going? What are you doing to checking on that? And the second one is, how do we adapt a field experience that hasn't been going very well? And other examples from the past. So let's take a look back at that first item, which is, how can faculty check on how well the field experience is going? I'm gonna stop the sharing right at this point. We'll just think about that one before we move to the next one. And for those of you who have just been supervising regular field experiences, the same sort of principles may well apply. So back to the first item again, which is, what can faculty do to check on how well the field experience is going? What do folks do?
So since there's so much silence, I think I'm in my class now where I have to really push students to come out and say something. One of the things I think works very well in this whole project design is how much touch points you create and how many milestones you have in the project. And that gives you an opportunity very early on to sense what is going right and what is not going so right. Because I've come across many companies, small companies, like mostly entrepreneurial type companies, who would take this opportunity, but when it comes to the rigor of following up that project, either they may not have time or sometimes they lose interest. So the early on, you can identify and engage with the students as well as the companies. So the more milestones you have, the more touch points you create, and I think it is a good way of managing the project overall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Siddharth, let me sort of switch that kind of question a little bit towards you, which is one of, what kind of communication must continue to go on between you and the client and the student to make sure that the experience is going well? How are you keeping that communication thing going over the weeks that you're supervising?
Yeah, so I would say that to echo a little bit of what Ellen said before, from an experiential perspective, because we have a structure and process in place that we've been following fairly well for several years now, there are some complications or challenges, but the basic premise or the basic approach doesn't change. So whether it's real, virtual, or face-to-face, one of the things that we do in the consulting enterprise is we ask every team to set up like weekly 2-hour meetings on each project with the faculty. That is faculty meaning myself and my 2 associate directors, so that we can get a status update on what's going on, and also use that time to dig deep into specific aspects of the problem rather than just saying, is everything going okay, and make it more of a problem solving session rather than a process update. So that's one thing that we do, so we know at all times what's going on the project. The second piece is that we ask our students to do weekly status updates with our clients. So the team leaders and certain members of the team will jump on a call every week with clients, and that was happening even before things went virtual. So that kind of continues. And what I've been doing differently is kind of going to some of those calls now that it's a virtual environment, just to make sure that things are okay and people are feeling good on both sides. One of the things that I'm doing is that every week that we have an all hands call with the entire class, so that we just talk less about the project itself, but it's more of a way to stay connected, morale, just keeping people's spirits up type of call. And so that's one thing that we've been doing in addition as well. So I don't know if that helps answer the question.
Yeah, supervising a field experience is real work. I mean, there is nothing, particularly if you have more than one student, as people always do, it is time intensive, and it requires all of your background experience as a professional to make these things work well. Ellen, anything you want to add to that?
No, we have a similar process. And so I think it is about, having these frequent check-ins. And one thing that we try to do is to make sure that the students are delivering something in each of these meetings, so that there's progress shown, so that it's not, and like Siddharth said, it's not just an update or a status, it's they're delivering a small win each time. So there's some sort of measure of success and something that we can react to.
Yeah, good, very, very good point. Others of you, before I go to the next question, others of you who have supervised field experiences in face-to-face environments, anything else you want to add to the ways that we've been talking about checking up on students and trying to keep your finger on what exactly is happening? Anybody else want to add to that?
I can add one other quick thing.
Sure.
I know Siddharth probably does this as well. We just, and virtual or not, we do have faculty, client, and 360 feedback always. So that is a mechanism that's always part of our program. And, as we've moved to virtual, it's no different. So that's something that we're reviewing, and it's also part of the grade. And so, so students know the client feedback impacts their grade as well as the faculty feedback. And they know that if they're, a free rider on the project, that will also be noticed and it can impact their grade. So I think that's another way to kind of make sure that the train is on the tracks.
Yeah. I mean, in many ways, it's more intense than a regular 3-credit classroom experience, and that you're really on top of students on a regular basis. It's maybe the most significant experience at the school, and boy, you really got to be on top of it. Let me ask others again, and we'll come back to our Carlson experts. Says, how can faculty adapt a field experience that hasn't been going well? So does anybody have any examples here, whether they're virtual or not, of a field experience that has not been going well, and how you've had to adapt that experience? Any examples? So from across the whole group, anybody want to step up to that?
This is Angie from Duluth. I'm the internship director. And a couple of things that I would like to say specifically about this is it kind of ties back to what was said before in regards to consistent communication and follow through with all parties involved. And I think that goes hand in hand with being able to troubleshoot and problem solve situations that haven't been going well, right? And so it's about being able to, shall I say, nip that situation as soon as possible. And then collaborating with other people, not only in the organization, but along with colleagues to help try and resolve or redirect the project for that student. So it is a really collaborative effort, I would say. But the communication must be there in order to be able to handle the situation.
Got it. Thank you. Good point. Eleanor, Siddharth, you want to add to any of that about how you've had to in the past adapt an experience that wasn't going as well for the student as the student thought, or perhaps as the client thought?
Yeah, maybe I could give an example here, David, if that's helpful. So we've just had a project going on this semester. So before let me back up and say that one of the things we try to keep top of mind always is that, yes, we are trying to run a consulting practice with students. And so client satisfaction and client delivery is very important to this, because we want to have a sustaining enterprise so clients are happy with us and come back and so on. But we're also balancing this with the fact that this is first and foremost we are focusing on the students, and this is about student learning at the end of the day. So it's always a little bit of a delicate balance that we always try to strike in whatever we do. So as Ellen mentioned, we have a very strong feedback model. So, and we encourage students to introduce the feedback model in the consulting enterprise early on. This is an opportunity for students to give each other feedback, and for them to give feedback to us, and us to give feedback to them. So we try to create that culture. So now that we've introduced the model, if there are any issues that come up because of the regular check-ins that we've had, so much we're able to identify issues and give them that candid feedback using that structure or that model that we've shared before. In extreme cases, we have had clients, like we've had one this semester, that came to us early on during the project and said, look, we have noticed a couple of things. The team leader has very low energy. It seems like he's sort of sucking a little bit of the energy out of the rest of the team. And they said it in a nice way. And also, it seems like they're not super polished when they come prepared to these meetings. It seems hard that it seems that they don't quite know exactly what problem they are solving and so on. So that was an opportunity for us to intervene and assure the client that we will make this, this will not in any way impact the final outcome of the project, but thanking them for letting us know. And we gave a lot of coaching to the the team lead on these topics, but also we brought in some extra support. We had a second-year MBA student who stepped in to be more of a mentor to this team lead in this case, and coached him along and helped him with the process. So it's still an ongoing process, but it's gone much better.
It's such a great opportunity to model the role of a professional on your end, and how to do that well, how to invite and bring forward solutions to students who really need to have them at some point, and such a great test of what you're capable of having to do in this role. I'm going to share my screen again for the third set of items, which is about the assurance of learning. And I've tried to describe this in terms of a couple of things. We often think pretty much of the student, as we should, about student learning outcomes and what were the kind of methods that we use both formally and informally to ensure that students are learning. But I'm also very interested, and we'll talk about that, I'm also very interested in the methods that should be used to ensure that the faculty member, that you as a creator, the designer of the experience, have in fact created a really sound experience for them. How you can look back on yourself, it's sort of like a reflection opportunity to do that. And then another method to ensure that the needs of the client is being met. How do we know that? How do we come to that understanding? So back to the first one, which is methods, formal or informal, to ensure that the students are in fact learning what we've asked them to learn, and what they've been trying to achieve has in fact been achieved by the end of that semester at different points. Anybody want to speak to that in general, in any sort of field experience, and then we'll come back to Carlson folks. What are those student learning outcomes? What methods have you been using to ensure that students are learning what they should be learning in a field experience?
This is Rachel from the Crookston campus. I use a survey instrument that I borrowed from somebody else, and it helps to assess student learning and whether they valued the experience. And I can't remember who originally created it, but then I've also been able to use it for publishing purposes. So that's been really great, and I can share that if anybody has any questions if I find it. So that helps me to assess if they've learned and how valuable the experience was. And then I also throw in a few questions of what did I do good and what could I have done better? And then that anecdotal information. So what did I do that helped you, and what did I do, what could I have done to make it a better experience? And I've found that to be beneficial.
Yeah, I mean, it's great on that, and you can get the student feedback for that. Rachel, as you think of your own experience as an instructor, as you reflect back on how things went, have you sort of created some plans that have perhaps changed a little bit because of the way the experience went, that you are sort of telling yourself, what do I do?
So I think the big takeaways that I've learned are, because I've done quite a few client-based projects in my undergraduate classes, which is a whole different ballgame than MBA classes. So the ones I do, the client is not charged a fee, and so the expectation is set out right away that this is a free service to you, here's what you're going to get. You have to realize these students are still learning too, so some of what you get might be awesome and some may be not awesome. Then the other piece I've really learned is that I need to have multiple points where the students check in with me and I give a lot of feedback. And then I also have found I need to have an intro part where it doesn't matter if they meet with the client virtually or in person, but they need to meet with the client in some way, shape, or form at the beginning, a few times in the middle, at least probably one or two, and then at the end to present their findings so they can sort of have that wrap up. So those have been the big key takeaways in the years I've been doing this that I've found.
Ellen, I've got a question. Could you have an example of a good student learning outcome that you've kind of held on to over the years? It's a good measure of you really understanding and knowing the students have achieved something. Unmute.
So ours is a 6-credit course, so it's really structured. We have a lot of deliverables, and so milestones, and then quite a few deliverables. Pretty much every week they have several things to submit, and so so I'm really assessing them along the way based on these things that they're actually working on and producing. And then at the end of the day, I really look at it as could they articulate the value that they provided to the client? Could they make this concrete, the from to story, the before and after? That's what I really look at the end of the day, because that's what matters to the client. But it's also what we're really trying to teach them, is that analytics isn't valuable if it isn't implemented, if it's never used, if it's just interesting. And so all of our presentations are structured like that. What was the value is kind of where the students start. So that's what I really look at. And we're looking at that as the measure of success for our work.
Mm-hmm. Siddharth, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think Ellen captured all that well. I think ours is similar. We have so many touch points over the course of the semester, and we have this very, there's a lot of ways to observe students. So we certainly make use of that. As Ellen indicated, we too, in our grading, we take in our perception of the student, which kind of takes a big portion of the grade, but there's also client feedback on whether they had impact and saw value from the project. There's peer feedback in terms of how they collaborated with each other. There's also a bit of self-reflection that takes up a small piece of it too, in terms of how much they learned or grew from this process. So all of those together kind of form their grade. And I think our graduate program here at the Carlson School has some rubric around assurance of learning, if I'm not mistaken. And our grading system largely sort of aligns with that to make sure that whether it's collaboration, whether it's problem solving, whether it's other types of impact and value and so on, tries to mirror that.
Excellent. Anyone else want to comment on the ways in which you like to assess either student learning, whether or not you as a faculty member have done the design well, a reflection on that, or a degree to which the client's needs are being met? Anyone else want to add to that?
David, if I may interrupt, we do have
Sure.
a couple questions lingering in the chat.
Sure, go ahead.
Gail and Jennifer asked, Gail first asked, could someone speak to the undergraduate experience, those students who are just learning to become professionals? Jennifer asks, at CSOM, are the clients identified first and then matched with faculty in their courses? And or do faculty contact you first with a request to find clients for their courses, and then do you find clients?
Okay, good. James, go back to that first question. Say it nice and loud again, and then Ellen and Siddharth will.
Sure. So Gail's first question here. Could someone speak to the undergraduate experience, those students who are just learning to become professionals?
Okay, I'm going to assume Gail would probably wants to know, is that experience for students at that level supervised differently, or perhaps expectations perhaps being different? Anything that you can glean from that, Ellen or Siddharth?
Yeah, so maybe I could
Can I
start
just
by.
clarify my question?
Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead. Go ahead, Gail.
I think just in the interest of time, there's been enough in the chat on that, and
Okay.
moving forward, it's been very insightful and informative to hear about the past situations, but the curiosity is really about moving forward into the new environment that we're going to be finding ourselves in. And Ellen specifically drawing out the fact that the client may not even have the bandwidth at this point to engage. And that's a big curiosity right now. How are we going to find these experiences for our students?
Hi, this is Kim Downer. I am faculty in the healthcare management program at UMD.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the healthcare institutions have flat out canceled internships for summer at the very least. And I've been working a lot with our accreditation body to identify alternate experiences, case studies, working with individual employers to help maximize student opportunities and learning. So Gail, to kind of get to your question, that's one of the things we've been doing to kind of open up the range of possibilities that would supplant an internship field experience, or a student would be within an organization, to try and help clients see what an offline experience might look like, as well as to develop possible alternatives.
Yeah, let's stick with that for a few more minutes, Kim, and for the rest of the folks here. It's a great question, because it really is one of, well, we can't do this in the way that we hoped or expected to do it. And so you brought up case studies or other sort of projects. What are some of those other things that people could be doing if it turns out, and you still want to give credit somehow for this field experience? Is it, things that people would want to use in an alternative way?
Well, I mean, that's kind of in progress work right now. I know, and maybe because it's healthcare management, I have a couple students working with certain employers on developing disaster preparedness plans. Okay. So something that's readily usable for companies, whether it be a pandemic. I've got one student who is in the Fargo area. He's working, to incorporate things like flooding into his plan. And he has a business that he has a relationship with. He's been employed with that business, and he's approached them, and together we're working out the various details of that. But I find it's been a lot of talking with the student about what their learning objectives are, what they want to get out of it. In some case, talking with the employer, maybe through the student, or maybe with an employer more directly. It's just probably 3 or 4 times the amount of communication as previously, but I know for healthcare, really kind of making sure that if this were to happen again in the near future, that businesses are ready and are more resilient going forward, is an opportunity in a way for us.
Yeah, great points. Really tough situation that all of us are in, and I certainly like some of the solutions you've had to come up with. I have a final slide here that has to do with primarily Ellen and Siddharth, because you've been doing these experiences. It said, what have the students said about this kind of virtual experiences? What change do they suggest? What did the clients say about this? What changes do they suggest? And importantly, how has your design for the field experience changed over time? So how are students talking about the sort of experience they've been getting? How have the clients been talking about it?
Ellen, do you want to go first, maybe?
Unmute.
I'm really have been surprised that we haven't heard more. I just thought, I really did anticipate that this would be more problematic than it has been, but I think using Zoom as a tool has been really smooth. And, we haven't heard much from students or clients, except for to say that things are working really well. I would say, like I mentioned before, we probably are doing more meetings than we had in the past, just to make sure that the communication is happening. But it's easy to jump on a Zoom meeting, and I think people have the availability. And so I haven't really heard much other than positive feedback. I don't know about you, Siddharth, but for us, it's been kind of surprisingly smooth. And we haven't then changed the design because we've been able to meet expectations, get the work done. And so, we've been happy with how it's worked.
Siddharth, you want to add?
Yeah, I would agree that because we were already halfway through the semester, I think making the switch was easy. No, I wouldn't say easy, but clients were very adaptable and students were very resilient. But I do worry a little bit about the fall, because I think students are sort of powering through this, hoping that we'll be back on campus in the fall. But if that doesn't happen, then I worry about morale. I worry about just people's spirits up and kind of having to do this for one more semester. I think we, as Ellen and I, as faculty staff, can do it, but I think I worry about the students.
Yeah, since this, I don't know how to make a check on this, but a couple of you could chime in. No one knows exactly how fall will go. When one can imagine 2 or 3 possible scenarios. One, that it truly becomes a full 15-week face-to-face. I'll be a little surprised at that. Another version of this is it's a full 15-week online experience for all faculty. And then there's this hybrid thing that could be sitting out there. We start one way and we finish some other way, depending on however we start or finish. If you had preferences, I know you'd like to do it face-to-face. Between the last two, between fully online, fully virtual, or something that resembles a little face-to-face and a little online, what's complicating for you? What's the most complicated one? What's the one you sort of dread having to do if it comes up? Anybody else from the crowd as a whole? If you have to do a field experience this fall, and it's either announced early as fully online, or it becomes hybrid, can you make that adaptation? That will be a very tough complication for a lot of people.
I think adaptations are possible as long as we know early. I think the worst case scenario, what we dread is not knowing until late, or a decision made one way and then changed at the last minute.
Right. I hear you. Yeah, I know. We all want to know a little bit early for sure. Well, we are right at about 2 o'clock. I want to thank both Siddharth and Ellen and all of you for hanging in there for this hour. I hope the hour went by quickly for you. We have a feedback site that will be sent to you via an email probably as soon as we get off or so. And it'll be a short set of items about today's session. And then of course you can send anything to me if you like, and I'll be happy to try to route it to the right person or try to respond to it as well. We are looking at probably early or middle of sometime of next week when the recording for this, if you had someone who was not here, that should be made available, be on our CEI site. And I just want to thank you and all of my team for being here and being present. And be safe and be healthy. It's really good to see all of you again, and hope to see you soon again on campus. Bye-bye for everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.